Tonight, I'm going to give you a brief drought update, and then we're going to talk about smart irrigation. So July is Smart Irrigation Month, as dubbed by the Irrigation Association, given that July is usually the peak irrigation month. Helping me out tonight are my two water conservation interns this summer. They're going to take over the second half of the presentation for me, so it's always really nice to have a little bit of help, so I'm not doing these things alone. So if you've been here before, you've heard my spiel, but just a little background on Highlands Ranch Water. So Highlands Ranch was established in 1979. Mission Viejo Development Company purchased the parcel, and then in 1980, Mission Viejo Water and Sanitation District was created to meet the water and wastewater needs of the community. You probably know we changed our name a couple times since then. For a long time, we were Centennial Water, and then when the city of Centennial came about, that got extremely confusing for everybody, both our customers and their customers. So now, as of 2025, we're Highlands Ranch Water, so much easier for everybody involved. We're a Title 32 Article 1 special district. So what that means in Colorado is that we're a form of local government, but we're not a municipality, so we don't have some of the power that a municipality has. For example, some of our neighbors like Castle Rock Water, you might hear them doing things like implementing landscape code, like limiting the amount of high water vegetation you can have on your property or in a new development. So as a special district water provider, which most of us here in Douglas County are, we don't have land use authority in our service area, so we can't put in landscape code like that. That would have to come down from Douglas County. We can regulate anything related to water, so we're going to talk about water waste tonight and some outdoor watering restrictions we have in place right now. So we can do things like that. We are a nonprofit, so everything on your bill just goes right back into keeping our infrastructure running and up to date, supporting our staff, our capital improvement projects, and then we're governed by a 5-member board. So as of 2022, we're a fully citizen-elected board. So for several years, we were a developer board, but happily to be citizen-elected, we do elections every 2 years. So if you're ever interested in running for the water board, anybody in our service area who owns property in our service area can run for the water board. Next year, 2027, we'll have 3 seats available. So if you're interested, thinking about getting involved, just something to think about. We deliver 4.5 billion gallons of water annually to the communities of Highlands Ranch, parts of northern Douglas County, which on this little service area map you see here, the kind of orange parts with the stripes, that's northern Douglas County, and then also the Mirabel Metro District. So the Mirabel Metro District is the community called Solstice, which is out by Sterling Ranch. So we are the water provider for Solstice. It's a relatively small community. We're not the water provider for Sterling Ranch. So it's just that little piece that you kind of see on the other side of Santa Fe out there. That's one of the last parts of our community to be built out. So it's Solstice, and then there's a couple homes going in the Westridge area, but otherwise we're about 99% built out, and we have been for quite a while. So it's kind of a nice thing for us. A lot of folks in the metro area, Denver, Aurora, Colorado Springs, Castle Rock, Parker, these folks are anticipating a lot of population growth in their communities in the next 20 years, and we're really not. So we're pretty secure in our water supply and knowing how many folks that we do have to provide water for. We are also your wastewater provider. So not every water provider is also a wastewater provider. So we've got a surface water treatment plant. We've got groundwater treatment plants because we utilize both surface and groundwater. And then we also have a wastewater treatment plant. If you're ever interested in touring either of our plants, they're really cool. We do one once a month. You can go online and sign up, or you can talk to our communications people that are here tonight afterwards. But we just did a major upgrade at our wastewater treatment facility that finished up a couple years ago, which is very cool. And then our surface water treatment facility is currently under construction, but we've already made some really cool upgrades there. So as promised, I'm going to touch on what's going on with drought for us right now. If you follow any of our communications, you know on April 1st, we went into a stage 1 drought restriction, which means we are hoping to reduce overall community-wide between commercial and residential customers a reduction of 15 to 20% compared to our usual historical average that we would use in a normal year. So that's what that that 15 to 20% means. It's based off of reducing from a 5-year average from previous years. Residential, multifamily, and medium and small commercial properties, you're on 2 assigned watering days per week. Yes, we are enforcing the assigned watering days. So if you have a neighbor that you want to tattle on, we have a report water waste form. A lot of you are using it, so keep them coming. Help us, be our eyes out there. Help us come together as a community and meet this reduction goal. Our large commercial customers, you might see the Metro District, Douglas County School District, some of our larger HOAs, you might see them watering more than 2 days per week, and that's because it's just not possible for them to irrigate all of their zones on a 2-day schedule. They might have hundreds or even thousands of zones. The Metro District has over 6,000 irrigation zones. It's just not realistic for them to water on a 2-day schedule. Those folks are expected to be 20% under their allocated water budget. Everybody in Highlands Ranch, whether you're residential or commercial, is on a water budget. So they're expected to be under as well. We are looking at some of the results that are coming in from our June billing period, which is actually more like mid-May to mid-June. And we have seen a 20% reduction in commercial irrigation use, which is awesome. So that is coming down. Overall, community-wide, looking at the last 2 months, not current, right? Because that's kind of the drawback of having our 2-month billing period. So we're getting the billable demand a little bit later, but we're seeing from previous months, we're down a few points, so that's great. We're reducing. We want to keep that energy up, keep that going. All of our normal restrictions that you probably know are still in place. We don't allow any overhead sprinkler irrigation between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. We don't give out any landscape adjustments for the installation of new high water use sod during stage 1 droughts either. If you are participating in our turf replacement rebate, we do give those customers exemptions from the daytime watering restrictions and the day of week restrictions in order to get their new landscapes established. So anyone that wants to move towards a new low water landscape, we want to try to support that as much as we can. And we'll talk a little bit more about those types of landscapes later in the presentation and some of the different challenges with those. So our U.S. Drought Monitor, this is put out each week, every Thursday. It's really cool to go on there. You can look at the whole country. You can look at, specifically here, we're looking at Colorado. This little star you see on here, that's where we are. Unfortunately, we did move into extreme drought as of July 9th. So we'll see what happens this Thursday when it comes out again. But we're kind of persisting in these really hot conditions, right? And you don't need the drought monitor to tell you that. You can just feel it outside, feel it in this room. We're pretty warm here tonight. This is just a little snapshot of daily system use. So this is looking at our demand at our plant. So this is raw water use. This is not billable demand. That red line is what our projected demand would be. The blue lines going up is the water demand by the community. So you can see we're kind of back and forth here. May, we were down because we had some rainy weather, and just as you would expect, we're kind of back up again now that things are hot again. So just some of the things that we're monitoring and that we're reviewing when we're looking at where we are in our drought response. So I always like to frame up my presentations when we talk about conservation just to teach people a little bit about our service area and how water supply for our service area gets used. This is from a 5-year analysis, 2017 to 2021. You can see our single-family home users here make up the bulk of the water supply used in our service area. This is specific to our service area. Not every community is like this. Some folks, their water supply is used way more by like commercial irrigators, that sort of thing, right? So the majority of our water supply is used by single-family homes. Then our irrigation-only users, the next biggest class, is going to come in at 12%. That's irrigation for golf courses, HOA common areas, the landscaping around an apartment building. And then we also have the Metro District irrigation. They use about 5 to 6% of our supply each year. That is irrigation for our parks and parkways. So just something to keep in mind as we go through this. But because most of you here, I think, are single-family homes in Highlands Ranch, and that is where the bulk of our water use is, we're going to talk tonight about our outdoor water use, right, for efficient irrigation. So on average for a single family home, about 50% of your water use for an entire year is going out on the landscape. So there's a big opportunity for us to conserve here. So smart irrigation, so this is not just upgrading to more efficient equipment that's out there now, but it's also about, your behavior as well, different methods of irrigating and just being mindful. One of the biggest things is maintenance, right? Like following up on your landscape, being in touch what's going on. So those are some of the things that Lane and Valeria are going to talk to you about tonight. Also, I'd like to point out the difference between conservation versus efficiency. So conservation is when we're actually reducing the amount that we water, whereas efficiency is we're utilizing what we already have in a better, more effective way, right? Like we're trying to make sure of the water we're putting out by our sprinkler system, more of that is making it into the landscape, not on our sidewalks and our driveways and down the gutter and that sort of thing. So ultimately, it's about reducing water waste. So in our service area, we do prohibit the wasteful use of water. This is outlined in our rules and regulations, right? So some of the things we can do as a special district water provider is we can prohibit the wasteful use of water. We also have our daytime irrigation restrictions in the summertime, right? And we've had those since the early 2000s for a long time. For us, we define water waste as excess water flowing in street gutters from irrigation or other outdoor practices, or just neglecting to repair leaks, that sort of thing. This is a great example of water waste here, right? This is just one of our neighbors over at the office, so it was hard to drive into work every day and see this. A lot of conversations there happening, a lot of education and working together, collaborating with our water users. But you can see this leak has been persisting so long, there's actually algae growing on the curb. So those are things we really want to address around the community. I thought it would be fun to show you guys some of the stuff we've been seeing around the community this summer, but maybe it's just going to be depressing. I don't know, given the situation. But we do go out and do enforcement. We do talk a lot with residential and commercial customers and just try to educate people. And sometimes, yes, we do send violation notices to get folks in line with our mission here. So water waste can be things like this is a broken drip line. We've got standing and pooling water over here. We've got, in this picture here, if you can't see it in the back, a huge geyser going off in front of a residential home for a broken sprinkler head. We've also got things like another broken drip line over here, right? So we'll talk about overhead irrigation a lot, and we'll talk about drip too. Drip can cause issues as well, right? It's not just overhead sprinkler irrigation. We also are sometimes seeing things like water waste here in this image, so water waste all over parking lots, that sort of thing, trying to crack down on that and just get everybody on the same page. This one over here on the left was an interesting one. I drove by a home where they were hand watering and they had a shut-off device on the end of their hose, but they had locked it open and it was just running all over the lawn and pouring out into the street. So there's all kinds of ways that you can waste water. People get creative. And then another just classic example of a broken sprinkler head over there on the right. Again, we've got algae on the curb. So a lot of conversations needing to be happening, but mostly I think positive in the end, taking away. Most people don't know these things are happening. So it's about all of us trying to just watch out for each other, help each other out. Big part of when we talk about smart irrigation in the landscape is having something called a water budget. Now, we've already done the hard work for you because you all have an individual water budget for your property. It is specific to your property size. Your neighbor's water budget might not be the same as yours, right? It's based on your property size. So your water budget that you get assigned in the summertime is two components. There's an indoor part of your budget for indoor water use, and there's an outdoor component. So that's what we'll talk about tonight, is that outdoor component. The water budget is extremely effective in bringing use down for our community. So this is an almost 30-year graph of our community. The blue bars you see are water use for single-family homes, and this black line you see that's going up is the number of taps or homes. And you can see we were pretty, high up there. And then right here, I don't know if you can see, but where it says 2003, That's when we implemented the water budget rate structure. We saw an almost immediate 20% drop after we implemented this water budget rate structure. We kind of continued on a downward trend, and then we've plateaued over the last 10 to 12 years or so, but it's pretty good given the fact that we're increasing in the number of taps the whole time in our community, right? So it's pretty effective for conservation. And there's a little bit of math that goes into this. I'm going to try to simplify as much as possible and not bore you. But essentially, when you create an irrigation water budget, you're multiplying together an element of weather, how much water your plant needs, and then the area of your landscape. And that's how we determine your water budget. So here, for the water budget that's attached to the rate structure, the weather component is the historical ET for our service area given your specific billing period. Because again, your budget's not going to be just different because of your property size. It's also going to be different because we have 8 different rolling billing cycles in Highlands Ranch. So it can get pretty complicated. So everybody's a little bit different. But that historical ET, that's what we're factoring in for the plant. We're using the requirements for a high water use turf grass because at the time that this water budget went in 2003, that's what the majority of the landscaping was and still is in Highlands Ranch, right? How can we balance this to be conservative but still provide you with enough water to make sure your landscape is healthy, look good, you can meet all your HOA requirements, right? And then the area, that's the percentage of your property size. So we give you 45% of your property size to determine this calculation for your water budget. The weather component I referenced earlier, the evapotranspiration. So that is the amount of collective water that evaporates off the soil surface and plant transpiration goes into the air, right? So essentially the amount of water that plants and soil lose into the air. So when we irrigate, it's not just it's dry and I want to make it wet, it's how much water have we actually lost and how much do we need to replace. So that's why we're using ET as our weather factor to develop your water budget. All sorts of different things affect ET, so sun, air temperature, humidity, wind speed, soil exposure, plant density, all of these things affect the ET. Like I said, we are using the historical ET for our water budget rate structure, but it's held up pretty well over the years. We do track it of how well it aligns with the irrigation requirement given the current ET, and it's held up quite well over the year. So this is just breaking it down a little bit more, but over the course of the irrigation season, 6-month irrigation season, in total, we give you 27 inches of water per square foot. That is pretty generous, but that 27 inches, again, comes from this ET. So the historic ET for our service area is 36 inches of water over the course of the irrigation season. We account for 9 inches of average rainfall during the irrigation season. Our 20-year average is actually about 10 inches of water here in Highlands Ranch per season, and then 36 minus 9 gets you the 27 inches. So we want you to be well taken care of. And that's all I have for you for the moment. I'm going to hand it over to Lane to talk to you about some smart irrigation practices.
Okay. Hello. Thank you, Paige, for starting us off. I just want to talk a little bit about cycle and soak. That is a method of irrigation that we really recommend. It can help prevent some runoff or some of that standing water that Paige showed us earlier. And so essentially it's breaking up your irrigation cycle into much smaller chunks. So around 5 to 7 minutes, especially here in Highlands Ranch and a lot of the Front Range, we have a really clay heavy soil. And so we really don't recommend watering for any more than 5 to 7 minutes at a time. It just won't absorb into the soil and it'll pool. And we really recommend doing 3 cycles. So it's about 5 minutes on and then 30 to 60 minutes off. And then you want to do that 3 times. And so the first cycle is really to break the surface tension of the soil, and then the second starts to actually infiltrate the soil. And then by the third, we're actually filling the root zone, which is the goal of irrigation. We want to fill the root zone so all the plants can absorb that water. And that third cycle especially helps prevent any loss that happened from wind or evaporation over the course of the irrigation time. And you can kind of see here, we have a little chart here to reference for recommended time to water per zone. So most of you probably have fixed spray irrigation or our high efficiency rotary nozzles. The fixed is just a spray of water, it doesn't really move, whereas the high efficiency rotary has multiple streams that will rotate. And so we really recommend these high efficiency nozzles, and we'll talk about this a little bit, but you'll notice that they tend to have, on this chart, a longer runtime than the others, and that might not seem immediately intuitive, but that's actually because they put out significantly less water per hour than your standard fixed head. And so they put around a ½ inch to 0.7 inches per hour, as opposed to your typical sprinkler head, which puts at the very least 2 inches per hour. Sometimes it can be as high as 5 or 6, which is a lot of water. Additionally, to help with efficiency, these high efficiency nozzles often have much larger water droplets, which are harder to lose to evaporation from the hot, dry air, or they're harder to blow away. So you get a more well-spread irrigation over your lawn. And that precipitation rate that I mentioned, the ½ inch, really depends on the manufacturer and also the water pressure in your valves. So the ideal water pressure is 40 to 45 PSI, but we'll go into that a little bit later. So this is just a broad overview of some of the rebates and incentives we have for irrigation equipment, and we're going to go into those now. Okay, back to high efficiency nozzles. So for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, the lower precipitation rate and the larger droplets, these help reduce water use by around 10 to 30%, depending on your landscape. Again, due to those larger water droplets and lower precipitation. To get the maximum efficiency with these, you really need pressure-regulated spray bodies, which keep that pressure at around 40 to 45 PSI. And as of 2021, Colorado House Bill in 2019 decided that all spray bodies sold in stores in Colorado have to be pressure-regulated. And so if you go to Home Depot or an irrigation warehouse or anywhere where you're buying irrigation equipment, those spray bodies will be pressure regulated. But of course, if you're ordering on Amazon or somewhere online, they might not be. And if you haven't updated your sprinkler system in the last 5 years since this ruling, you may not have these pressure regulated spray bodies. So you might not be getting the maximum efficiency out of your irrigation system. So that is worth checking. And yeah, so we do rebate those at $4 per nozzle. A major exception is we do not rebate the Rainbird HE. At the time that it came out, it was higher efficiency than their other offerings, but they just don't meet our standards for high efficiency. Another rebate that we offer is the rain sensor. So we offer up to $35 per rain sensor. And so they can be added onto virtually any irrigation system, and they can be connected to your controller either wired or wirelessly. That wireless connection might be preferable for a lot of you. I'm sure a lot of you have your controllers for your irrigation systems set up in your garage, and so that wireless might just be a little bit easier to connect it. And so these essentially collect rain precipitation, and they have they're called hygroscopic discs that are made of cork or some other material that will expand when filled with water, and that will essentially shut off your irrigation system. It'll kind of bypass that controller. And so your controller will still think that the sprinklers are on, but they're not. It'll just disrupt your system. There are other sensors, like there's electronic sensors, or there's some that have like a little bucket that tips over, just a little mechanical sensor for the rain. The vast majority have those hygroscopic discs, but for those, it's very important to check them a few times per season, because those discs wear over time and they'll stop expanding properly to flip that switch. And if those aren't working or they're worn out, you're not getting those water savings that we like to see. A lot of these come with a combination freeze and wind sensors as well, which just helps further with those savings. This is our most popular rebate, our smart controllers. We offer up to $75 on the rebate on these. The most common smart controllers that we see are the Rachio or the Orbit Beehive, but any EPA WaterSense certified smart controller is eligible for rebate. And how these work is they connect to your Wi-Fi network at your house, and they pull local weather data to essentially decide the best irrigation schedule for your property. There's a slight problem with this. Sometimes the nearest weather station is pretty far from your house. So it's not uncommon here in Highland Ranch for it to be raining on one side of town and bone dry on the other. And so we really recommend using them in conjunction with the rain sensors that we just talked about. And yeah, this is a pretty controversial rebate among water providers for that reason. And also they tend to recommend watering more when it's really hot or when evapotranspiration is really high, which might not necessarily save water in the really hot summer months, but we see a lot of our savings on the shoulder months, so fall and spring. Customers with the rebate, around 60% reduce their water use by around 19,000 gallons per year. And it's also really easy. It's much easier than your standard controller to set days, or especially the cycle and soak that we talked about. So during drought restrictions, it can be kind of tricky to set like, oh, I need to water on Wednesday and Saturday. So this, you just go in your phone as it usually is and just say those days. And a resource that we have for you here, we have a partnership with Resource Central, which through us, you can get a free 75-minute slow the flow irrigation assessment. So they'll come to your house and they'll do irrigation efficiency tests and a visual inspection. They will recommend an irrigation schedule for you and any possible upgrades that you can make to your system. So you can find that on our website or their website. And I'm going to pass it off to Valeria for our turf rebates.
Cool. So another rebate program that we offer is the turf replacement rebate. This program has been available since 2018, and we are close to reaching 300 participants, both residential and commercial, although most of them are residential customers. On average, residents can save up to or around 20,000 gallons of water by making this turf change. So there's two main turf replacements that we do. The first being low water turf, and that includes Tahoma 31 grass or dog tough grass. Both of them are Bermuda grass hybrids that use between 60 and 80% less water than Kentucky bluegrass, which is the one most commonly found in your yard. So another way where you can make your yard more water efficient is by hydrozoning, where essentially you group plants together. So you can have one zone of low water plants, another zone with turf, and each zone is adjusted accordingly for their irrigation. So you're not overwatering any zones, and you're fitting each plant's needs by modifying your irrigation per zone. So now to get into drip irrigation, as Lane and Paige mentioned earlier, drip irrigation is the most water efficient irrigation method that is used today. It can help increase irrigation efficiency by around 90%. And there's two main types of drip. The first is inline drip irrigation, in which drip lines are placed in a grid formation spaced between 12 and 18 inches apart. The next type of drip irrigation that is commonly used for landscapes and yards is point source drip irrigation. The biggest challenge with these types of drip irrigations is potentially them getting clogged or stuck, so it is very important that you're constantly checking on them. There is one additional form of drip irrigation that you may have either seen or heard of called microsprays. However, a few years back, this type of irrigation was considered high efficiency and low emission because it is. And these microsprays are typically found in Colorado-scaped areas. However, as we can see here, there is high potential for water waste, whether it's from weather or just excess water. These are no longer exempt from the drought restrictions. So now using microsprays, they do need to follow the standard drought restrictions for other overhead irrigation systems. And we also want to, again, quickly discuss the Resource Central's Garden in a Box program, where they offer a variety of garden kits with pre-established plants that once you pick up, you can just put into your garden directly. Through Highlands Ranch Water, you can get a $25 discount per box, and they come in a ton of shapes, sizes, colors, aesthetics, anything that you'd want for your yard. And yeah, these garden in a boxes complement the turf replacement program that we do very nicely, as these plants do use very low water or just low water. So if you are interested in applying for any of the rebates that we talked about this evening, you can head over to the website. Each rebate has a somewhat different process. So for irrigation equipment, soil tests, and high efficiency toilets, in your application, you just need to include a proof of purchase or a receipt, and it must be done within 90 days of this purchase. And then for the turf replacement rebate, you must receive an HRCA approval letter first, where they approve the design that you're wishing to install into your yard. And you also must receive approval from us before you break ground so that we can ensure that all the program requirements are being met. And the turf replacement does need to be completed within the same season. Well, thank you so much, and I'm gonna hand it back to Paige.
And thank you all for coming tonight. That's the end of like our formal presentation. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a percentage of front yard that need to be grass?
Not anymore. No, you can fully Coloradoscape or Xeriscape your front yard. We do low water turf grasses, so you can have those fully in your front yard. For if you're going to do artificial turf, which we don't rebate, but HRCA does allow you to do, there might be a different requirement on front yards for the artificial turf. But for the things we rebate, yeah, you can do it fully. You don't have to have any high water turf grass in your front yard anymore. Yeah.
Chart that you guys have the different times per week for each type of bed.
Sure.
So if we just take that and divide by 3 for the smart cycle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, those sprinkler times are like recommended, so you might have to workshop it a little bit for your site conditions. But essentially, yeah, you just want to take the month, your nozzle type, you can divide it by 2 or divide it by 3 is best, but sometimes it's not always possible depending on the controller you have. But yeah, you can essentially just take those run times and divide them by 3. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Go ahead.
Is watering recommended in the morning or in the afternoon? In the evening?
Ooh, okay. So I would say the best time is probably in between like midnight and 6 a.m. Usually or like 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. A lot of people are like, don't water at night because it'll be wet all night and it'll develop a fungus. That's not really a problem here in Colorado. It's just too darn dry. So yeah, my recommendation would be between like midnight and 6 a.m. would probably be the best. Yeah. Go ahead.
Do you have a list of contractors for Colorado State landscaping?
Yeah, so we don't recommend private companies as a public entity, but kind of our workaround for that is if you go on our website, we do have a list of local landscape companies that have been utilized by previous participants of the turf replacement rebate, and I would never put a company on there that someone was like, this was terrible, we had an awful time. So yeah, there is a list, I would say maybe around 30 to 35 companies on there so far. There's 2 main growers who are licensed to grow Tahoma 31 in our metro area, and one is Green Valley Turf, which is over on Santa Fe, and then the other one is Scientific. So they're both licensed to grow the Tahoma 31, and they will also do like replacement projects as well. So if you want to work directly with a grower, they're available. But there are other landscape companies that'll do the Tahoma 31. So if you're looking at, shop around, find what's right for you, who's right for you.
And if we remove turf, does that change our water budget? Or that's it?
Your water budget stays the same. Yeah. Yeah.
So with the turf replacement, like my backyard basically faces southwest frogs. Is turf replacement worthwhile, or is it not even worthwhile?
No, you can totally still do it. Yeah, we have the demonstration garden at our offices is south and kind of partially west facing, and that's all Coloradoscape plant material. It's just a matter of selecting the right plants that like those conditions. But yeah, there's plenty of, especially like natives, or even if they're not Colorado native, like Southwest natives that'll thrive in an environment like that. Absolutely.
Can you use Colorado State under like a pine tree? Because obviously you have to worry about the dropping needles. Like, is there something you suggest that's easy to get the needles out?
Yeah, I mean, I would give your trees a little bit of space. Like, I don't think you need to be directly under there. The other thing that we have to think about when we're taking away turf and we're putting in Coloradoscapes is, fire risks. And we want to make sure, when you have things directly under trees, they call that like ladder, I'm going to say it wrong, but it's like ladder fuels, ladder fuels, I think is the term. So I would hesitate to put anything directly like under your pine tree. I would kind of like let that be and kind of let it mulch out its own space. I think raking out underneath the pine tree, unfortunately, is just a part of life, maybe. But yeah, there are like ground covers, like vinca and stuff like that will do well under shade. If you want to consider something like that. But yeah, you're ultimately still going to be raking out pine needles out of there. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to hang out for a little bit. So if you have any more questions, feel free to come say hi. Thank you.